Welcome to UPSC Vinod. So this is the last part of the discussion with respect to 2026 mains. Yes. So let us start with question. India's growing economic weight demands are greater role in shaping the international financial architecture. That is, India's growing economic weight demands a greater role. It demands a greater role in shaping the international financial architecture. Discuss the reforms required in global financial institution to reflect the emerging economic realities. So every year there is a suggestion with respect to reform in global financial institution. So now we must link with the reforms with India's growing economic weighted demand. India's raises as a major economic along the growing weight of emerging economies has exposed mismatch between global economic realities and the governance structure of international financial institution. Yes, there is a difference between now there is a difference arising in between present governance structure of international financial institution and compared to global economic realities. Reforming IMF, World Bank, and related institutions is therefore the essential for more representative financial order. So yes, we should have a more representative financial order. Yes, we should reform IMF, World Bank, like and international financial institutions also. Key reforms required. See, greater representation and voting power, democratizing the leadership, development oriented financing, reform global debt architecture, climate financing and technology, strengthen the global financial safety nets. So these are all the steps should be taken, reforms suggestion. And with respect to India's interest, there is a concept what on what basis India is looking to reform the global financial institutions and conclusion. See, starting with greater representation and voting power, reform IMF and World Bank quotas and voting shares to reflect the growing economics contribution of India and other emerging economies. So we should reform. India is demanding a reform in IMF, World Bank quotas and voting shares to reflect the growing economic contributions of India. Reduce the disproportionate influence of advanced economies in decision making. So we should reduce international financial institutions should reduce the disproportionate influence of advanced economies in decision making. So this is with respect to greater representation and voting power. Democratizing of leadership. Move towards merit-based and transparent selection process for IMF and World Bank leadership rather than informal arrangement favoring particular region. So we should move towards merit-based and transparent selection process for IMF and World Bank leadership rather than informal arrangements favoring particular regions. Development oriented financing. Expand concessional and long term financing for climate adaptation, infrastructure, health, and sustainable development. Increasing the lending capacity of multilateral development banks through greater capitalization and innovative financing. So, with respect to development-oriented financing, we should expand the concession and long-term financing for climate adaptation, infrastructure, health, and sustainable development. Reform global debt architecture. Established more predictable mechanism for sovereign debt restructuring, particularly for vulnerable developing economies. Improve coordination between international financial institutions, private creditors, and emerging leaders. So, you should reform the global debt architecture, more predictable mechanism for sovereign debt restructuring, particularly for vulnerable developing economies. Climate financing and technology. Ensure the climate financing in additional, affordable, and accessible rather than creating unsustainable debt burden. So we should ensure climate financing in additional, affordable, accessible manner rather than creating unsustainable debt burden. Strengthening the technology transfer and capacity building for developing countries. So you should strengthen the technology transfer and capacity building for developing countries. Strengthen the global financial safety nets. Expanding special drawing rights and improve their allocation and rechanneling towards the vulnerable economies. So we should expand the SDRs. Better coordinated IMF facilities with regional mechanisms such as BRICS New Development Bank and Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. So IMF should coordinate with those regional banks. So this is how the key reforms are required for international financial institution. See, the same will apply for World Bank, the same will apply for IMF. So, if they are separate, தனித்தனியாக கேட்டாலே நம்ம வந்து இதை தான் எழுதலாம். Now, coming to the India's interest. India can advocate reform through G20, BRICS, and Global South Coalition, while promoting its experience with the digital public infrastructure and development financing and inclusive growth as a model of emerging economy. So, conclusion. Reforming global financing institution is not merely about giving India a larger voice. It is about making system more representative, resilient, development oriented, and democratization. A rebalanced financial architecture would strengthen India's strategic autonomy while making globalization as a more inclusive. So this is a conclusion. Okay, so we can expect such kind of question in this year, mains 2026. Thank you.